Jason Miller never believed in horror stories. He always thought people made them up to scare others. And he was the type of person who would walk alone at night, just to prove there was nothing to be afraid of. So when his friends planned a picnic party near an old forest outside their town, he didn't hesitate for a second. In fact, he was excited. It was supposed to be a fun escape from their boring routine, just music, food, jokes, and maybe a little drinking. Nothing serious, nothing dangerous, but that night turned into something none of them were ready for. Something that didn't just stay in the forest, but followed them back. Something that never really ended. They reached the picnic spot in the late afternoon. Jason, his girlfriend Emily, and their close friends Ryan, Chloe, and Marcus. The place looked beautiful at first. A quiet lake surrounded by tall trees, with soft wind and golden sunlight shining through the branches. But there was something strange about the atmosphere. Something heavy and silent, like the forest was watching them instead of welcoming them. Chloe even laughed and said it felt like the beginning of a horror movie, but no one took her seriously. Marcus, however, looked uncomfortable and said in a low voice that he once heard people disappeared from this area years ago. But Ryan quickly made fun of him, and everyone laughed it off, trying to keep the mood light. As evening slowly turned into night, they set up a small fire, played music from a speaker, and started sharing stories, some funny, some scary. Their laughter echoed into the dark forest. But Jason noticed something strange. The echo didn't sound right. It felt like their voices were getting cut off, like something in the trees was absorbing the sound. But he ignored it, thinking maybe it was just his imagination. After some time, Emily suddenly stopped talking and whispered that she heard something. Everyone went quiet instantly, and then they all heard it too. A faint sound coming from deep inside the forest. Slow, dragging footsteps, like someone walking very slowly on dry leaves. Jason stood up and pointed his flashlight toward the trees, but saw nothing except darkness. The sound stopped as soon as the light touched the forest. Ryan said it was probably an animal and tried to calm everyone down. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Instead, it grew stronger with every passing minute. The fire started to feel smaller. The darkness around them thicker and the silence heavier. Around midnight, they decided it was time to leave. None of them said it directly, but they all felt uncomfortable as they packed their things. Jason reached for the car keys, which he clearly remembered placing on the blanket, but they were gone. At first he thought maybe someone moved them, but when everyone denied it, panic slowly began to rise. They searched everywhere, under bags and side pockets, around the fire, but the keys were nowhere. Then Marcus suddenly froze and pointed toward the edge of the forest, his hand shaking. They all turned and saw it. A tall, thin figure standing completely still between the trees. It was too dark to see clearly, but its shape was unmistakably human. Jason shouted, asking if it had taken their keys, but the figure didn't respond. It didn't move. It just stood there silently, watching them, and after a few seconds that felt like hours, it slowly stepped backward into the darkness and disappeared. Emily started crying and begged to leave immediately, so they decided to walk to the main road, which was about a mile away. Leaving everything behind, they moved quickly through a narrow path, trying to stay close together. Jason walked at the back, constantly turning around, his heart beating faster every second. And then he saw it again, the same figure walking behind them, not running, not making any sound, just slowly following. But every time Jason blinked, it seemed closer than before, like distance didn't matter to it. Jason whispered to the others that something was behind them. They all turned but saw nothing, but they believed him because they could feel it too, that presence, that cold feeling crawling on their skin. They started walking faster, almost running now, branches hitting their faces, leaves crunching loudly under their feet. Then suddenly Chloe screamed. They all turned and saw that Marcus was gone. He had been right there a second ago, but now he had vanished. Without a sound, they called his name again and again, but there was no response, only silence, thick and unnatural. And then from deep inside the forest came Marcus's voice calling for help. But something was wrong. The voice sounded stretched, distorted, like someone trying to imitate him but failing. Jason shouted, asking where he was, and the voice replied from multiple directions at once. "I'm here. Come find me." Emily started shaking violently and said, "That wasn't Marcus. That's something else was using his voice." Suddenly the trees around them started making cracking sounds, like something moving between them at high speed, circling them. Getting closer, the air turned cold, their breaths became visible, and then they heard footsteps running toward them, fast, heavy, unnatural, and that was the moment they completely lost control. They ran without thinking, without direction, just trying to escape. Jason grabbed Emily's hand tightly and ran as fast as he could. He didn't look back. He didn't stop. All he could hear was the sound of something chasing them, something that didn't breathe, something that didn't slow down. After what felt like forever, they finally reached the road. They stopped in the middle of it, breathing heavily, exhausted, thinking they were safe. But then Ryan slowly turned around and his face went pale. Jason followed his gaze and felt his entire body freeze. Standing under a broken streetlight across the road was Marcus, but it wasn't really him. His body looked wrong, twisted at strange angles, his head tilted too far to one side. And his face was stretched into a wide, unnatural smile that no human could make. His eyes were completely black, empty and deep like holes. Emily whispered that it wasn't him, it couldn't be him. And then the thing that looked like Marcus started walking toward them, dragging its feet slowly, making that same sound they heard in the forest. Jason didn't wait. He grabbed Emily and ran again. This time a passing car stopped, and the driver quickly let them in. After seeing their terrified faces, they drove away without looking back. None of them spoke during the ride. They were too shocked to process what had happened. Later the police were called, and they searched the area, but there was no sign of Marcus, no footprints, no evidence, nothing. It was as if he had never existed. Days passed, and Jason tried to convince himself it was all some kind of hallucination, something caused by fear and darkness. But deep down he knew that wasn't true, because strange things started happening at his house. Small things at first, like doors slightly opening on their own, footsteps in empty rooms, whispers when he was alone. He tried to ignore it, telling himself he was imagining it. But one night, everything changed. He woke up suddenly around 3 a.m., feeling like someone was watching him. His room was completely dark, but as his eyes slowly adjusted, he noticed something in the corner, a tall, thin shape standing completely still. His heart started racing as he stared at it, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. And then the shape slowly stepped forward into the faint light coming from the window. And Jason felt pure terror as he realized what he was looking at. It was the same figure from the forest, the same unnatural presence, but this time it was closer, clearer, and it was smiling. A wide, horrible smile that stretched too far across its face. Jason tried to scream, but no sound came out. And then behind that figure, something else moved in the darkness, something familiar, something worse. Another shape slowly appeared, dragging its feet. And as it came closer, Jason recognized it instantly. It was Marcus, or at least what used to be Marcus, with the same twisted body, the same black empty eyes, and the same unnatural smile, standing right inside his room, watching him. And just before Jason lost consciousness from fear, he heard a whisper right next to his ear, a voice that sounded like all of them combined, broken and wrong, saying slowly, "The picnic is not over yet." Daniel Carter never liked being alone at night. But that weekend he didn't have a choice. His parents had gone out of town for a picnic party with relatives, and his younger sister stayed with them, leaving Daniel completely alone in the house. At first he thought it would be fun. No rules, no noise, just peace. He even planned to watch movies and order food. But what he didn't know was that the silence of that night would slowly turn into something unbearable, something alive, something that was watching him from a place he never expected. It started in the evening when he noticed the house across the street. It had always been empty for years. No one lived there, no lights, no movement, just an old broken house with dark windows. But that night something was different. As Daniel looked outside while scrolling on his phone, he noticed a faint light coming from one of the upstairs windows of that empty house. At first he thought maybe someone finally moved in, but something about it felt wrong. The light was too dim, too still, like it wasn't from a normal bulb. He ignored it and went back to his room, trying not to think too much. But later that night around 11 p.m., while eating snacks and watching TV, he heard a soft knocking sound. He paused the TV and listened carefully. The sound was coming from outside, slow, steady knocks like someone tapping on wood. He walked to the window and looked across the street. The light in the empty house was still on, and for a brief moment he thought he saw something move behind the curtain. His heart skipped. He stepped back, telling himself it was just his imagination, but the knocking didn't stop. Instead, it became louder, more clear, and that's when he realized something that made his blood run cold. The knocking was not coming from the empty house. It was coming from inside his own house, from downstairs. Daniel froze, listening carefully. The sound echoed through the quiet house. Knock, 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 slow and patient, like someone waiting. He grabbed his phone and slowly walked toward the stairs. Every step felt heavy. The house felt different, colder, the air thick with something he couldn't explain. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, the knocking stopped. Complete silence filled the space, making his ears ring. He stood there for a few seconds before gathering the courage to check the front door. But when he reached it, there was nothing, no one outside. The street was empty, quiet, and the house across the street stood still with that same faint light in the window. Daniel locked the door tightly and went back upstairs, trying to calm himself, telling himself it was just some random noise, maybe pipes or wood settling, but deep inside he knew that wasn't true. Around midnight, he decided to sleep, but sleep didn't come easily. Every small sound made him open his eyes. Every shadow looked wrong. And then, sometime after 2 a.m., he woke up suddenly, feeling like someone was in his room. He sat up quickly and looked around. But everything seemed normal until he heard it again, the knocking, this time louder, faster, coming from downstairs. But mixed with it was another sound, footsteps, slow and heavy, walking across the living room floor. Daniel's breathing became uneven, his heart pounding in his chest. He grabbed a flashlight and slowly stepped out of his room. The hallway felt endless, darker than usual. As if the darkness was deeper than it should be, he walked toward the stairs and looked down. And for a split second, he saw something move at the bottom, a shadow quickly disappearing into the darkness. He almost ran back to his room, but stopped himself, trying to be brave. He slowly went downstairs again. The knocking had stopped, the footsteps gone, but the front door was slightly open. Daniel stared at it in disbelief. He clearly remembered locking it. His hand started shaking as he walked closer and pushed it shut, locking it again. And that's when he heard something that made his entire body freeze, a voice, very faint, coming from behind him, whispering his name, Daniel. He turned around slowly, his flashlight shaking, but there was nothing there, just empty space. He backed away and rushed upstairs, locking himself in his room, his mind racing with fear. He sat on his bed trying to make sense of everything. But then his phone suddenly buzzed, making him jump. It was a message from an unknown number. He opened it and felt a chill run down his spine. The message said, "Why'd you lock me out?" Daniel dropped the phone, his hands trembling. He looked at the door of his room, expecting something to be there, but it remained closed, silent. A few seconds later, another message came. "I'm still here." Daniel couldn't breathe properly. He didn't know what was happening. He tried calling his parents, but there was no signal. His phone showed no service, even though it was working fine earlier. Then suddenly the lights in his room flickered once, twice, and then turned off completely. The room fell into total darkness. Daniel sat frozen, unable to move, and then he heard it. Right outside his door, slow footsteps, stopping just inches away, followed by a soft knock 3 times, just like before. Knock, knock. Knock. Daniel held his breath, staring at the door, tears forming in his eyes, and then the handle slowly started to turn, making a faint clicking sound, but he had locked it. It shouldn't open. But the handle kept moving, slowly, forcefully, and then it stopped complete. Silence again. Daniel waited, not daring to make a sound. Minutes passed like hours, and just when he thought it was over, a soft whisper came from the other side of the door. "If you don't let me in, I'll come from the other side." Daniel's eyes widened. He turned slowly toward his window, and his heart almost stopped. Across the street, in the empty house, the faint light was gone, and in the dark window, there was a figure standing, tall and still, watching him. And then suddenly, in a blink, that same figure was no longer in the window. Daniel felt something behind him, a presence, cold and close, and before he could turn, he heard the same whisper right next to his ear. "I told you, I'm still here." And at that exact moment, his bedroom door slowly creaked open on its own. Ethan Brooks always loved quiet places. He was the kind of person who enjoyed silence more than noise. So when his friends invited him to a picnic party near an old wooden cabin deep in the woods, he agreed without much thought. It sounded peaceful, just a small group of friends spending a night away from the city. But the moment he arrived, he felt something was wrong. Something about that place didn't feel natural, like the silence was too deep, too heavy, as if the forest itself was hiding. Something that didn't want to be found. They reached the cabin in the late afternoon. Ethan, his girlfriend Laura, and their friends Jake, Olivia, and Noah. The cabin looked old and broken, with cracked windows and a door that barely stayed closed. Jake joked that it looked like a perfect place for a horror movie. Everyone laughed except Ethan, who couldn't shake the strange feeling in his chest. The trees around the cabin were tall and thick, blocking most of the sunlight, making the place darker than it should have been. As evening came, they set up a small picnic outside, playing music, eating food, trying to enjoy the moment, but every now and then, Ethan noticed something strange. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing, just pure silence, like everything alive had left that place long ago. When he mentioned it, Noah laughed and said maybe the animals were scared of them. But Ethan knew that wasn't it. There was something else, something watching, something waiting. As night fell, they lit a fire and sat around it, telling stories and trying to keep the mood light, but the darkness around them felt different, thicker, almost alive. The fire didn't seem to spread enough light, like the darkness was swallowing it. After some time, Olivia said she needed to use the bathroom and went inside the cabin alone. Minutes passed, and she didn't return. Laura called her name, but there was no response. Jake went inside to check on her, but he didn't come back either. Now the mood shifted completely. The laughter gone, replaced by unease. Noah said they should all go inside together, so they did, stepping into the cabin cautiously. The air inside was cold and smelled old, like something had been rotting there for years. Ethan called out their names, but only silence answered. They searched each room, the kitchen, the small living area, but there was no sign of Olivia or Jake. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Laura started panicking, saying they should leave immediately, but when they tried to open the front door, it wouldn't move. It was stuck, as if something was holding it from the outside. Noah tried forcing it, but it didn't budge. The fear inside them started growing rapidly, and then suddenly from upstairs they heard a sound, a slow dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across the floor. They all froze, staring at the staircase. The sound continued, moving slowly from one side to the other. Ethan whispered that they needed to check. Even though every part of him was telling him not to, they slowly climbed the stairs together, each step creaking loudly under their weight, the air getting colder with every step. When they reached the top, they saw the hallway, dark and narrow, with 3 closed doors. The dragging sound stopped, replaced by complete silence. Ethan slowly walked toward the first door and pushed it open. Inside was nothing but an empty room covered in dust. The second door revealed the same thing, empty, lifeless. But when he reached the third door, he felt something was different, a strange feeling like something was waiting behind it. He hesitated for a moment before opening it slowly, and what he saw made his heart stop. Olivia was standing in the middle of the room, facing the wall, completely still, her back toward them. Laura rushed forward, calling her name, but Ethan grabbed her arm. Something was wrong, very wrong. Olivia slowly turned around, and as her face came into view, Laura screamed. Her eyes were completely black, her mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile, just like something not human, and before anyone could react, Olivia let out a loud, distorted laugh that echoed through the cabin, and then suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut, trapping them inside. Noah rushed to open it, but it wouldn't move. The room felt smaller, colder, and Olivia started moving toward them, slowly, dragging her feet, making a horrible, scraping sound on the floor. Ethan looked around desperately and noticed something written on the wall behind her, faint but visible. The words scratched deeply into the wood, "You shouldn't have come." And just as he read it, another voice echoed from the corner of the room. Jake's voice, but it didn't sound right. It sounded broken, Twisted, stay with us. They all turned and saw Jake standing in the darkness. His body bent in unnatural ways, his head tilted at an impossible angle, his eyes black just like Olivia's, both of them now smiling. Watching them, slowly closing the distance, Laura started crying. Noah tried breaking the door again, but it was useless. Ethan felt like the walls were closing in, like the room itself was alive, and then suddenly, the lights from their phones flickered and died, leaving them in complete darkness. The only thing they could hear was the slow, dragging footsteps getting closer. And then right next to Ethan's ear, a whisper, cold and close. "You're next." Ethan screamed and pushed forward blindly, hitting the door with all his strength, and suddenly it burst open. He ran out into the hallway, grabbing Laura's hand, and they rushed down the stairs, Noah right behind them. They reached the front door again, and this time it opened easily, as if nothing had ever blocked it. They ran outside into the cold night air, not stopping, not looking back. They ran through the forest, branches cutting their skin, their breaths heavy and broken, until they finally reached their car. Ethan fumbled with the keys and started the engine. They drove away as fast as possible, none of them speaking, too terrified to even think. They didn't stop until they reached the city. Safe, or at least they thought they were safe. Days passed, and they tried to move on, telling themselves it was some kind of nightmare. But Ethan couldn't forget. The images stayed in his mind, the black eyes, the unnatural smiles, the whisper in the dark, and then one night, as he sat alone in his room, trying to distract himself, he heard a faint sound coming from behind him, a slow, dragging noise, the same sound from the cabin. His body froze, his heart pounding. He slowly turned around, and in the corner of his room, standing in the darkness, were two figures, tall and still, watching him, their eyes black, their smiles wide and unnatural, Olivia and Jake. And just as he realized what he was seeing, they both spoke at the same time, their voices overlapping, cold and empty. "You left too early. The picnic isn't over yet."